Hi guys. So today we're going to get on the subject about self-harm, which is one of the hardest subjects for DID that is talked about. And I'm going to be talking about a little bit about these two books here. And I'm also going to do an interview with a friend of mine that also deals with this issue. So let's get into it. So in this book, done by Marley Strong, she's a psychiatrist, and she talks about self-harm in great detail and why it is so persistent and why it happens. And it states here, in 1980, a resident psychiatrist at my medical school asked me to discuss a case at a teaching conference. And she goes on to talk about a young lady who self-harms. But she also talks about Islamic healers and Morocco, I hope I pronounced that right, and how, some ritual beliefs and things like that cause self-harm. And as you can tell, I'm still a little congestion, but I really want to touch the subject on this. And it states here, was it possible that the young woman who harmed herself was like the Americans trying to heal herself? It got me thinking about self-mutilation. The more I thought about it, the greater my curiosity grew, until I finally became determined to make sense of the seemingly senseless behavior known as self-mutilation. The most appropriate definition of self-mutilation is that it is a debilitating, direct, and non-suicidal destruction or alteration of one's body tissue. And that's the thing. I've dealt with it since I was about 14 years old. And what I'm trying to figure out is self-mutilation in alternative states. Why do they do it, and what causes it? And so I'm digging deep into that. And according to her, a lot of this has to do with ritual beliefs and how to cope with things. And she states here, according to my definition, ear piercing is a form of self-mutilation. Although we normally do not give it much thought into it, on a deeper level, I examined cultural rituals, former activities that span generations, reflect a society's traditions, symbols, and beliefs, and are interwoven into fabric of social life, involving body modification. And what I found interesting, being, a survivor of ritualistic abuse, this is a hard subject to dig into, and she even talks about, for centuries, the Catholic Church canonized persons who zeally modified their flesh as saints. So there's things that, define what is wrong and what isn't, and why is it done. So she starts collabing with these other psychiatrists and psychologists, doctors. The classification that has finally emerged is that it is widely accepted, was developed by me in collaboration with my psychiatric colleagues Richard Rosenthal and Daphne Simon. The categorization of deviant self-mutilation into three observable types: major, stereotype, and superficial/moderate disregards. Etiology is both theoretical and simplistic. It is clinically useful because each type of self-mutilation is usually prevalent in certain mental disorders, either as a central diagnostic or an associated feature. So next, let's talk about those three things, okay? Major. Self-mutilation refers to infrequent acts such as eye ulceration, castration, and limb amputation. It is mostly commonly an association feature of psychosis, acute psychotic episodes, schizophrenia, mania, and depression, acute alcoholic and drug intoxications. Patients' explanations for this behavior tend to have religious and or sexual themes, e.g. That's more of a religious aspect. Now let's talk about number 2, which is stereotype. Self-mutilation refers to monotonously repetitive and sometimes rhythmic acts such as head-banging, hitting, and self-biting. It is usually impossible to discern symbolic meaning or specific thought content with these behaviors. They most often occur in moderate to severely mentally retarded persons, as well as in cases of autism and Tourette's syndrome. And last, superficial moderate, okay? The most common type of self-mutilation is found throughout the world in all social classes. It usually begins in early adolescence and refers to acts such as hair pulling, skin scratching, and nail biting, which is something I do, nail biting, which comprise the compulsive subtype, as well as to the skin cutting, carving, burning, needle sticking, bone breaking, and interference with wound healing, which comprise the episodic and repetitive subtypes. Skin cutting and burning that occur episodically are the most common of all self-mutilative behaviors and are a symptom or associated feature in a number of mental disorders such as borderline, histrionic, and antisocial personality disorders. Excuse me, I'm still sick yet, so I'm trying to talk. I have come to regard these behaviors as morbid forms of self-help because they provide rapid but temporary relief from distressing symptoms such as mounting anxiety, depersonalization, racing thoughts, and rapidly fluctuating emotions. When these episodic behaviors become an overwhelming preoccupation and are repeated over and over again, they begin to assume a life of their own and compromise what I term the repetitive self-mutilation syndrome. Persons with this syndrome may adopt an identity as a cutter and describe themselves as addicted to self-harm. This syndrome may persist for decades through a normal course in 10 to 15 years, during which the self-mutilation is interspersed with periods of total quiescence and with impulsive behaviors such as eating disorders, alcohol and substance abuse, kleptomania, uncontrollable stealing. Repetitive self-mutilators do not want to die, but they may become demoralized, depressed, and suicidal because they cannot control their self-mutilation and because they feel they had no one truly understand what they are enduring. So it's a very interesting subject, and I think it is something that definitely needs to be brought to light and understood. Okay. Now, next we're going to get into an interview with a friend of mine over this subject and questions that we want to understand. And one is with DID. Alternative states cause amnesia to us as a host to not really realize that self-mutilation is taking place. And that is a huge subject I want to get into. I also have alternative states that have self-harmed and still do at times. And I want to understand why they do it and what are they protecting. And according to what I've read, it's usually to stop suicide. It's more of a way of the alternative state dealing with coping memories of pain and abuse. So let's get into the interview. So, Joy, what signs and symptoms do you feel before it gets too overwhelming and self-harm and disassociation takes place?
Well, we have certain triggers that gives us flashbacks, and that triggers out some alters that have self-harming issues. And when we feel like worse and depressed and have lots of anxiety and stuff, then it's more easy to get into a destructive mode, or that an alter that is destructive comes out. And when we get destructive, we often dissociate and shut down. We shut down our sense of pain, so we don't feel what we're doing, which is really dangerous sometimes.
Do you find that like lack of sleep has a huge issue that can lead into it?
Yeah, definitely when we're tired.
Say, why do you think there are alternative states that self-harm? What's your opinion on that?
For us, it's mainly because we punish ourselves. So we have to punish the body in some way to, I don't know why really, but
do you think it has something to do with like self-coping of what I have read in the research of these books here? It states that the coping mechanism of self-harm is to prevent suicide. It's more like a coping mechanism
Yeah, yeah,
to
yeah,
bring yourself to
definitely.
more awareness. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. For us, when we if we get suicidal, sometimes we can do self-harm instead. We can negotiate,
Mm-hmm.
so that someone who or someone in the system that says that I don't want us to go and kill ourselves or do suicide,
Mm-hmm.
um, then we can sometimes get into the middle way that we can self-harm instead.
How long have you
Yeah.
been dealing with this? Do you know?
Um, since I was a kid, but seriously, since 10 years ago, I think.
Okay.
Then it escalated and it became really, really bad.
It's hard to tell the awareness when you have amnesia with it. Usually it's the
Yeah,
doctors and
yeah,
stuff that help you. I've been told since I was about 14, you know.
yeah. I did self-harm in different ways when I was younger.
Yeah.
I didn't cut though. Cutting is something I started later on.
Mm-hmm.
Um, or I didn't cut where people could see. I know that when I was 12, 11, 12, I tried to sort of break my own arm and stuff.
For me, it was like
Yeah.
I think what started out was not eating. I didn't want to eat because there was this
Yeah, yeah,
embedment
yeah.
of overeating, and then it became to where scratching, burning, cutting, it just all took
Yeah.
place in that range between 14 to 18. What new coping skills have you found through therapy process to be useful for the self-harming issues?
I think like grounding, and to do reality checks if I feel that I start switching or if I get triggered by something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I know that that can trigger out an alter that is destructive. Um, I can do some grounding, like where am I? What am I doing? Is it likely that what I'm what do you call it?
I would call it
What?
viewing a memory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So what I'm viewing, if it's happening now or if it happened then,
Then
and then I ask myself, how do I feel and why do I feel like this, and so on. So I try to just ground myself here
the
and
hard
now.
part is catching it. You know, if it gets to that 3 day stretch, usually for me, it's I either have to have an extra
Yeah,
appointment
yeah, yeah.
made
It's
or
just out of the
medication.
window.
Yeah, because it's you get too tired to fight with it anymore. You know.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
Do you feel this alternative state that self harms you is unaware of the present time?
Yes, for sure.
Same here.
They are.
It seems
Yeah,
like they are set in a time period, well, when that trauma happened,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
they don't have the skills to cope with the anger and the the self-harming issues they have. They don't know how to ground themselves. So it's
yeah,
difficult for an alter to figure out, where am I going to go with this? What am I going to do with this? The biggest issue I've read in the books, believe it or not, even those that don't have DID, it seems to be the stare off and the start of a dissociative state. And it was talking in this
yeah,
book here about how a therapist has to be patient and they have to
yeah,
earn trust with those states without causing more harm. Basically, finding out why they
yeah,
do it and what's causing them to do it. And it seems like once a therapist or a mental health care provider gets to know that alternative state and talks to them about what is the present time, how old they really are, why are they doing this, let's find a new strategy, it seems like the tension eases off and they're less likely to harm
yeah,
themselves, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, is there any other
Yes.
thing you would like to bring to light about self harm?
Well, there's a lot of room, like a lot of talking that it's for attention. So
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing that I would like to sort of take out, that it's not done because you want attention, at least not for us.
I mean, if it was for
Um,
attention, we wouldn't be hiding it. I think that's the thing.
no, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And if for us it's for punishing, uh, obviously a lot of the times. Um, But I know some people that does it, because they get a sort of a kick out of it.
Hmm.
And then they want to do it again and again and again because of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just want the rumor about it being for attention to go away, because it's not.
Yeah.
I don't know anyone who self-harms that does it for attention.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, and the thing is too, do you find that through therapy and talking about this, do you find that your alternative states do this behavior because they're not aware of what the body really is, or basically the age of the body, or they hate the body, you know?
Yeah, yeah, they usually hate the body, and
Mm-hmm.
as well they don't they get um sort of very dissociated when they do it. So we don't really we don't feel pain. We don't know who we are and where we are at the moment.
Yeah.
And usually after the self-harming, um, we kind of wake up. I don't know, that's not the correct word, but you
Come
sort of
to. Yeah.
yeah, you come to, and you change to another alter maybe, or to yourself and stuff. Um, and we don't really know what happened and what we did. We just see that we've done something to our body.
I have a question for you that kind of relates with my own therapy. How do your littles react with the self harming issues? Are they aware that it's happened, or are they kind of surprised when they come to and find that the body's been harmed?
Um, I think they quite often are scared of it.
Mine
They
too.
get really upset when they see that the body is harmed in
Mine
some
seem to
way.
tattletale. Mine are tattletales. If the body's been harmed, me or other states like to hide it. They don't want my therapist to know, but the littles, they'll start crying, come right out and say, "We got hurt." And
Yeah,
they'll show her, they'll talk to her about it. They're almost like a
yeah.
self-helper in some ways. What do you think therapists should do when noticing self-harm with someone with DID?
Um, it's difficult because I think it's quite hard to stop it,
Mm-hmm.
because it often happens in a different state of mind. So we kind of like, I think uh, one has to work with the alters that does the self-harming,
Mm-hmm.
and find out why each individual do it, and then you can work on coping skills and so on.
Yeah.
Maybe you can also work at letting like someone else help, so that they don't shut, because usually I think with the amnesia it's because the alters that are destructive, they kind of shut everyone else away. um so maybe try to make them open up to everyone else inside,
Exactly.
I
I
would
like how you
say.
put that.
Yeah,
Do you ever notice? Let me ask you one more question here. Um, when you're dealing, let's say you had an episode, do you find that it's easier to talk to if a person doesn't panic? Like they're not going, "Oh my God, you did a bad thing."
yeah,
Instead, they're willing to
yeah,
look
for
at it,
sure.
show you care and kindness, and say, "Hey, let's fix this, let's talk about this," than more or less the shock of, "What did you do? This is bad." Because according to
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
this book here that I've read, it states that even ear piercing, nose piercings are a subject of self harm. Yet
yeah.
we encourage that. So what's the difference
Hmm.
between what we're dealing with to cope with pain and emotions and flashbacks than for someone to get their ears pierced or nose pierced? Same kind of
Yeah, yeah,
scenario. I think
yeah,
it's just based on this big belief in the media and society that self harm is such a huge. They make it like it's a suicidal ideation, when in fact, for people
yeah,
like us, it's a coping mechanism to keep us from
yeah.
suicide. You know,
Yeah, for us, it's definitely a coping skill. It's suicide attempts are something completely different.
same for us.
If we, yeah, if we want to do a suicide attempt, we do a suicide attempt, and if we want to self-harm, we self-harm. It's
Yeah,
But as I said before, sometimes you can negotiate.
Mm-hmm.
If the destructive part doesn't shut you out, you can negotiate so that it's less dangerous.
Yes. Fourth.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah, I
hoping.
like the bilateral one.
Have they ever? Do they do the
It's good.
vibrating tool for you?
No, I've never tried that one
Okay.
actually. I've listened to music.
Okay.
That's what I've done. Yeah.
Have you ever seen
But
the
it really
EMDR bar?
helps. Yeah, yeah,
Okay. Usually, all your therapist has to do is order the vibrator tool. It plugs right into that bar, and it's just this little left and
yeah,
right thing. That way, if you have alters that
yeah.
are blind to, seeing the lights, then you can use that as a stimulation as well.
Thank you. That was a really
Yeah,
good.
they're cool. Have you ever had issues in therapy where alters are trying to harm you in therapy?
Yeah. Um, Not so much because we haven't like it was a long time since we did, really hard stuff.
Yeah,
But then yes. Um, and the last like years they haven't dared really to give us that kind of treatment. So we've been more um, existing and trying to stay alive, basically.
yeah. I think that's the
Yeah,
whole idea behind this. I think that's the hugest issue is the misrepresentation of what this coping skill is. Even though it's not a healthy
yeah.
coping skill, it's still a
No, it's
coping
not healthy
skill.
at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that's the problem is people are not understanding that, until therapy is done to change these behaviors, they're not going to change. And
no,
especially with, I think there was another thing in this book, they talk about how to, and again, I've talked about this in my videos, I think you have too, collabing those physicians, doctors, and
yeah, yeah,
neurology
yeah,
all together.
exactly.
And
Some of the alters use sharp objects,
mm-hmm,
um, and I think really that's from what happened to us.
yeah,
And other ones sort of try to harm in I think even more destructive ways because I mean cutting and stuff you can see it.
yeah,
Everyone else can see it, but it's not the most dangerous
yeah.
self-harm
I
issue.
mean, to me, if,
I
if
think
people need to notice that a lot of times self harm is done up on top of the arm. If it was a
yeah,
suicide
yeah,
attempt, it would be here, you know, and
yeah, exactly.
that's something that doctors and therapists need to discuss and be like, okay, this is not a
Yeah,
suicide attempt. It's a coping to get an endorphin to deal with a memory, you know.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly, exactly.
do you find that alternative states will self harm you to get out of a situation? Like mine will use it to get out of a doctor's appointment.
Yeah, yeah,
Where they got to check your body in places that make you feel uncomfortable. I've had alternative
yeah,
states that are aware that a doctor's appointment is coming and they will harm me to try to get out of that situation. Now, lately it's
yeah,
been a lot better because my therapist goes to my doctor's appointments and discusses it in
mm,
great detail before we go with all alternative states.
yeah.
So there's like this team
Well,
effort, you know.
yeah, we have the care home and the staff here,
Yeah,
and it really has helped us a lot. We are a lot safer, calmer. We have this, strict schedule of
guidelines.
what to do and when, and um, they come with us to appointments, doctor appointment, which is really good because sometimes we don't remember what the doctor said,
Yeah.
and sometimes we just need the encouragement and the help.
It's funny you
And
talk about that because in the book it stated the same thing that, to
yeah,
to be they say that people in inpatient that have self-mutilation issues actually heal faster in inpatient care because of those guidelines.
yeah,
They feel
yeah,
cared about, they like the idea of being
mhm,
watched, nurtured, loved. And that's the big
yeah,
thing with DID is you don't love yourself. But when you have somebody showing you love and affection and care, it boosts that endorphin so you're not harming
yeah,
yourself.
exactly. And I think that it's And now I forgot what I was about to say.
It's okay. It
I
can all
love
be.
this.
It can be edited.
I start saying something and then someone else disturbs, and I was like,
Yep.
"What did I say?"
These are great books, by the way, Joy. I was shocked. This
Yeah,
is my
yeah,
favorite, and I'm reading them both at the same time to do this because I wanted to get an understanding of it. But this one I like because it actually had the stories of people
yeah,
in it that talk about it, and they talk about the sessions. So they're like
yeah.
talking in great detail on how he starts out, and 80 to 90% of them don't trust him. In fact, they play a game called
Oh,
basically.
trust is a big, big
Yes.
factor for success.
Yes.
Yeah, I've had like the counselor that I have now.
Yeah.
I've had him for I think it's 5 years now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, 5 years. And I'm just starting to trust him like for the past half year. It's
Yeah.
gone better and better. And I think, with the schedule and very strict
Yeah.
way of living, it has helped us because I mean, it was a long time since at least since we cut. I mean, I dig like this
So do I.
sometimes when
Yep.
yeah, so I've got lots of scars here. But
Yeah.
anyway, the strict guidelines and stuff has
Yeah.
made us less dangerous. We
Yeah.
haven't tried to cut for a long time. We haven't really made suicide attempts for a long time. And I was actually quite proud of myself or ourselves because we had a bit of a fall down or a, what do you call it, dip? No? No?
Yeah. It's
We
about right.
we
Yeah.
w- we got worse
Yeah.
in like February, March, so we had to
That's
go
the
into the
worst time of
hospital.
year. Worst time of year.
Yeah, but we didn't self-harm, and that's
That's
that's like
good.
a major, major thing for us. Yeah,
When
we
you're
would
in
probably
therapy,
like,
when you're in
yeah,
therapy and you do this, because I did
yeah,
yesterday, have you ever had your therapist just try to slip their hand in? Because if I'm just
no,
curious, because now like mine, when she does it, they won't harm her. They'll harm me,
no,
but they won't harm her. So
yeah,
it's like, and if
no,
your therapist has a thing where he can't touch you, can he slip something in that hand to see if that'll
yeah,
to stop them from hurting you?
yeah, that is a good idea. Yeah, yeah,
I think the biggest thing is talking about it without panic and calling you bad or horrible or
yeah,
why did you do that? And the main reason that it's done is to cope. So then as a therapist, I think a lot of these therapists need to go, okay, we need to find a new coping skill. We need to find something that gives you that endorphin that you need, you know.
yeah,
As
yeah.
I
You don't need to hear that you're weird, that you are doing it for attention, that you are like wrong.
yes.
I mean, that's the feeling you have already. And if someone outside, like in 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 hospital here right now, they
Yeah.
have this policy: if you self-harm in the hospital,
Yeah.
you get kicked out. It
And see,
doesn't
to
matter
me that
how.
that's so
I
wrong
know
because
it's
how are
weird,
you
isn't
how
it?
are you supposed to I mean,
I know, it's so weird
to me
because
it
I
should
mean,
be
if you are
okay.
suicidal,
Yeah. To me it should
yeah,
be
if you
where
are
they give you.
suicidal, you go to the hospital, and then they say if you do a suicide attempt in here,
Yeah.
we will kick you out. And it's not making sense for me.
No. It don't make sense. It's that's like telling a drug addict if you've done drugs we don't want you in our,
Yeah.
it doesn't make any
No,
sense.
exactly.
Do you find the self-harming is less when you are able to process through a memory that's come back to you?
Yeah. Yeah, if I can process things and if I can ground myself, as I said before, and realize that it's a memory and it's not happening now.
Yeah.
Um, Often yes, but sometimes, I mean, if the flashback gives me the creeps and gives me the feeling of being just bad and
Yeah.
disgusting, then of course it's really hard not to punish the body.
You know what's
But
strange is
yeah,
that when viewing memories, I don't know if you have this issue, It seems like if I can project it onto a wall and view it, it's not as intense. But
No.
I can view all my trauma. My biggest issue is feeling the emotion and somatic
Yeah,
symptoms in my
yeah.
body. I
I
literally feel like
know.
it's happening again, and that's when that starts. As soon as that
Yeah.
emotion comes in, then I can't stop
Yeah,
it.
because it's yeah, I can sometimes do that too, that like if a trigger, like we have a certain trigger, we don't like a certain color,
Mm-hmm.
um and if we get triggered by that color, we usually can cope with it right there and then,
Mm-hmm.
but afterwards we get all these
Re-
emotional.
my my
Yeah,
therapist calls it a
exactly.
pre-recording over and over, where it repeats
Yeah,
itself and it won't stop.
yeah, no,
It's almost like
exactly.
when it repeats itself like that, it's almost like an alternative state wants a reaction from you. It's like
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
trying to get you to react to something they're showing you, and I think that is my biggest struggle, because when I finally get a memory and awareness of this alternative state, I want to
Yeah.
run. I don't want to be in the front. I don't want to hear it. I don't
No,
want to
no,
see it. And
no,
then
exactly.
my therapist is like, Eva, it's okay. Cry. And I'm like, I can't
No,
talk because I'm
no.
froze. And I'm just shaking my head. And she's like, it's okay. It's okay to cry, honey. Just cry. And I'm like, I can't. And then all of a sudden it comes
No,
out
it's
and the snot's
difficult.
running. And then I'm and all of a sudden I feel relief. And I'm like, why do I fight this every darn time?
Yeah, yeah,
you know? Let me ask you a question. When you get sick and it's really sick, do you find that
yeah,
you are not in control of how you are and who you are, and you actually become a
yeah,
smaller child in some ways?
yeah, yeah. Um, I do switch a lot more when I'm unwell,
Me too.
and yeah, a lot of the time it's the small ones that are out,
Yeah.
and um, yeah, it's just very messy and very unpredictable because we have lots of amnesia and lots of um not knowing what we have done because it's so fragmented
Yes.
because there are so many switches. Really
And it
annoying,
gets hard.
actually.
I think the one thing all of us can agree on is if we could have anything in the world, what would it be? And my first response is time. I wish I could control
Yeah,
time. You know,
yeah.
time is the most valuable, most
Sometimes it
precious thing.
goes, yeah, sometimes it just goes away. It's like all of a sudden the whole day is gone and you don't know what happened or what you've done.
Do you feel like
It's
you've
quite annoying.
like you did? I think my biggest issue is I feel like I didn't accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it gets
Definitely.
frustrating, and
It,
it actually feeds into more disassociation, because then there's this alternative state in your ear going, "How dare you? You didn't get this done. You're lazy. Why didn't you get this done today?"
yeah,
There's always that
exactly, exactly.
contemplation between the two.
Yeah,
You know, as you get more aware, you'll find that out. It gets quite annoying. um,
yeah, it is.
but well, I think that's about all we have. And unless you got something else you can think of, I don't want to hold you up like last time.
Last time was a blast.
that it was
It
a
was fun.
blast. It was tiring though. I hope you enjoyed that interview. It was a great pleasure to work with Joy on the issue of self harm. Now, I want to touch bases on this last book a little bit, since I did with the other book, but not this one. And in this chapter, it talks about the effectiveness the therapist must have, and that's between 176 and page 183. Now, it states here some of the things that a therapist needs: confidence, which ranks very high on the list; the ability to stay empathetic and close to the patient when that patient hears their own talk is strange, even to themselves, when their thoughts don't make sense or they act as committed against themselves are mysterious to them; the ability to appear knowledgeable about their illness, cutting, depression, low self-esteem, their feelings that don't belong, etc. an understanding of their despair and the ability to convey that understanding to the patient. A nurturing posture, basically a reparenting role, continuously directed toward the patient regardless of whether or not they request it. And last is optimism. Optimism about their future and the ability to overcome feelings that have worn them down, such as wanting to give up or hurting themselves. The helper who combines all of these traits offers the self-mutilator a way out of their painful loneliness and their relationship issues that may cause this. Okay, so this book, there was a lot of things that I found interesting in here. They have classifications, stories. There's tons of stories in here, not just with DID, but like eating disorders, child abuse, etc. And they also talk about why people do the self-harming issue, desensitizing and how a therapist does that, reassuring the patient and the therapist's words, mixed good stories on self-mutilation and dissociation, building a history with the patient, and just so much more. These both here are really great books. I recommend that you get them if you're dealing with self-harm issues. And I'm sorry this was a long video, but I hope you enjoyed it as I did. So that's all I have today, guys. Loves. Bye.